What do we talk most about in this country? The great British weather. We're obsessed with it. It's virtually a part of our culture.
My head is seriously cold.
But sometimes it can turn from being a mere talking point into something deadly. In Britain's worst weather, I'll be investigating some of this country's most extreme weather events.
I can't move.
To find out how they're caused and why they're so dangerous.
Snow. Pure, beautiful, but deadly. As a lecturer in geography at Oxford University, I'm on a journey to investigate this most fascinating and dangerous feature of our weather in Britain.
Well, I think this is officially a whiteout.
I want to understand what conditions are needed to turn the innocent snowflake from a thing of beauty into one of nature's most formidable forces. On the way, I'll experience firsthand the effect snow and extreme cold can have on my body. From the disorientation of a driving blizzard,
It would be a living nightmare very quickly.
to the terror and confusion of hypothermia.
I mean, you wouldn't last long, would you?
But it's not just the cold that kills. As the snow piles up, so does the threat of an avalanche. For anyone caught, the chances of survival are slim.
I realised that I was actually in the air and I thought, this is it.
Yet it's on the nation's roads that snow causes most damage. It only takes a few inches to kill or injure over 2,000 people each year.
Run. Quicker.
And despite the authorities going to great lengths to keep our roads safe, snow still causes chaos and confusion for millions more.
I had no water. I had no shovel. I just had this kind of inner conviction that it would be all right.
It's snow. Everyone loves snow. I'm British. People like snow in this country. But it's also very cold. You lose your visibility. There's beauty in the beast.
Of course, there's nothing new about snow in Britain. 150 years ago, we emerged from the so-called Little Ice Age. It was a period of intense cold lasting about 350 years between the 16th and 19th centuries. During this time, our cold, snowy winters were a cause for celebration. Frost fairs took place in London whenever the Thames froze over. Thousands flocked onto the icy river in these impromptu carnivals. More recently, Britain has shivered its way through a number of extreme winters in the latter half of the 20th century. From the 22nd of January to the 17th of March in 1947, snow fell every day somewhere in the UK.
And here's Leicester's mainline station. But where are the trains? Heading back towards London over the countryside, we find the trains marooned in the deep snow. The worst spell of weather for 50 years. We hope it'll be 50 more before we get another.
But Britain didn't have to wait 50 years. 1963 was the coldest winter since 1740. Dubbed the Big Freeze, Britain was literally freezing to death.
3 people died battling against the snow, and 2 more were suffocated in a snowbound car. It was the worst blizzard for 15 years, and in southern England, the worst avalanche of snow in living memory.
The country looked more like Siberia. Lakes and rivers froze, ice formed on the sea, and the power went off.
In Piccadilly, the lights went out for the first time since 1949. Hospitals were cut off without warning.
The freezing weather was caused by 2 huge cold air masses from Siberia and Greenland colliding over Britain. Normally, these would have been beaten back by prevailing warmer westerly winds, but in 1963 these winds failed to materialise. The country was frozen solid for nearly 3 months. "1963 was a very rare event. For most of the country, a snowbound winter is the exception rather than the rule. Snow more usually falls on sparsely populated higher ground, leaving most of Britain today institutionally unprepared for snow.
Within an hour of the first snow coming down, great stretches of road across Bodmin Moor in Cornwall were jammed. The snowbound queue of cars stretched for 6 miles, with motorists stranded in the cold for so long, the forces had to be called in to set them free.
On November the 25th, 2005, winter arrived in the southwest of England. 500 people were stranded all night in their vehicles. Just 8 inches of snow had paralysed the main A30 on Bodmin Moor in Cornwall.
Everybody's out there, ourselves, county authorities, the Highways Agency, the Red Cross are dishing blankets out, the RAF have offered us resources.
Britain reacted in its usual way to the arrival of snow.
I was actually down in Bodmin Moor when the snowfall occurred, and it took me 12 hours to get out of Cornwall. The problem wasn't the snow. The big problem was people panicking and abandoning cars. Not just parked by the side of the road, but abandoned in the middle of the road.
It's just, I think, the worst day of my life. I think I've lost the will to live, actually. I just want to go home.
The chaos wasn't really caused by the snow so much as people's response to the snow. And I think that's the big difference in this country. We need to learn how to respond to our different types of weather.
Our story begins when the temperature of the atmosphere is at or below freezing. Water vapour in the air freezes on a microscopic dust particle. An ice crystal is formed. This then begins to fall to Earth. The closer the temperature is to freezing, the larger these crystals become as they melt and stick together. This is snow. I'm on a mission to understand how the innocent-looking snowflake can turn into a lethal blizzard. In order to do that, I have to travel to Scotland, and Britain's snowiest place. The Cairngorms have long been a magnet for winter sports enthusiasts, attracting 1.4 million visitors a year. But with peaks over 4,000 feet, these beautiful vistas mask the true nature of this landscape. In winter, it's not uncommon for temperatures to fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius, and for winds to hit hurricane force, causing the wind chill to plummet to an astonishing minus 70.
The atmosphere cools at roughly 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet. So you're 3,500 feet up, you're already taking 6.5, 7 degrees off what would be a normal surface temperature. You stand up there with a wind speed of, let's say, 40, 50 miles an hour, and you can get very cold very, very quickly. The Canadian Air Force have a phrase, they call it 30, 30 and 30. Wind speed of 30 miles an hour, a temperature of minus 30, and you will die in 30 minutes. That's what can happen on the top of the Cairngorms in the depths of winter.
The contrast with down here couldn't be starker. In the last 10 years, over 70 people have lost their lives to the vicious weather up there. Tomorrow, I'll get to experience some of that for myself.
My head is seriously cold.
You're starting to shiver.
Stinging actually. Really nasty. I mean, you wouldn't last long, would you?
I'm in the Cairngorms in the Scottish Highlands to find out for myself how to survive in a snowstorm. To do that, we obviously needed some snow. But I wasn't expecting this.
On what is supposed to be the first day of spring, the northeast woke up to a whiteout.
We've had something in the region of 30 centimetres. The drifts are up to 6 feet on some of the roads
across the region, with police warning that only those with essential journeys should venture out.
Well, I came for snow, and that's just what I've got. It's a serious snowy morning. In fact, they're calling it the worst weather in Britain so far this year. That's good timing, isn't it?
Taking care of me today will be a group of men who regularly risk their lives in order to save others. The Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team has 43 highly trained members, all of whom volunteer their time and skills to save anyone in trouble on the mountain.
Unfortunately, folk tend to get into difficulty when the weather is at its worst, and it's a bit like firemen. Folk are running out the building and they're running in, and it's the same for us.
The team carries out regular training exercises on the summit of Cairngorm. Today, I'm the casualty, as they're going to show me just how quickly blizzard conditions can overwhelm the human body. I have to confess to feeling a bit nervous, as the weather on the mountain is in stark contrast to this stunning scene.
Fantastically beautiful Christmas card scene outside, but up there, serious wind speeds, and I'm told -30 wind chill. It's pretty damn cold.
Arriving at the bottom of the ski lift, we've already climbed 2,100 feet. Conditions have changed.
Still quite still, but significantly colder. I'm glad I came up in the ambulance, funnily enough. I hope that's not an omen.
The 9-man search team have to carry everything they'll need for the rescue.
Volunteer for a stretcher?
This adds up to about £60 per person. Not too difficult here, but where we're going, the snow could be waist deep. On the Cairngorms at this time of year, the very least we can expect are blizzard conditions. This means wind speeds of 30 miles an hour or more, sending the snow sideways, reducing visibility to less than 400 metres. But as the funicular railway takes us the rest of the way to the summit, we've just been informed the weather is much worse. We've been told to be prepared for the most feared and dangerous of all snow conditions, the whiteout.
A whiteout is where the air becomes full of snow swirling around, and all you end up with is a sort of whiteness. It's very hard to get any perspective of distance, any perspective of contrast, and that becomes very dangerous because you become very disorientated. Everything is just white.
Well, I think this is officially a whiteout, because I can't see further than 20 metres. I can't actually believe this is Britain, but it is. It's Scotland. Welcome to the Cairngorms.
As we trek out to the training site, it's -10, and the wind is gusting to around 50 miles an hour, creating a wind chill that feels about -27.
They say this is actually a fairly average sort of day, wind speed wise. So far it's all right because I've got the wind behind me, but if I turn and do that, oh, wow.
It's precisely these conditions that can spell disaster for even the most experienced.
Slopes are pretty disorientating because you get drifts building, so you can't entirely see where you're heading. It can be pretty bad and very demoralising, and that's one of the things that really starts to kick in. Is people, begin to lose a bit of hope. They don't know where they are. They're frightened. So it's all building towards a bad result for them.
Nothing at all. I can see that if I was here on my own, it would be a living nightmare very quickly, because it's really hard work. I mean, this is sort of midway up to my calves, this snow, but it varies quite a lot. I've gone up to my knees a couple of times. And it would end up being a mental thing, just to keep going. But keep going in which direction?
Blizzards are extremely dangerous for the human being. We're actually quite fragile beings. When you've got this combination of strong winds and low temperatures, you cool very, very quickly. So that can lead to hypothermia. So you get lost, you get cold, and you basically freeze to death.
So if I was lost in a blizzard, hypothermia would be my biggest fear. Team Doctor Peter Grant gives me a practical demonstration of just how quickly it can set in.
We'll take off your gloves. Okay. What's the temperature like just now, Simon?
36.9.
Okay.
They will monitor my body temperature so I don't get into real trouble. Normally it would be 37 degrees Celsius, but just a 2-degree drop to 35 would mean I'm becoming hypothermic.
You're getting cold now, aren't you?
I am good. Remember, it's blowing a gale, and the wind chill is about minus 27 degrees Celsius.
The body tries very hard to conserve the energy towards the core, to the important bits of you, the heart and the brain. Yeah. That's why you can't feel your fingers anymore. This must be distinctly uncomfortable now.
Actually, no, I'm starting to get quite chilly now. My head is seriously cold now.
36.5 at the moment.
Here.
36.5. Okay. If it happens quickly like this, you're very aware of getting cold. If it happens more slowly, more insidiously, then you don't tend to have as much of an awareness, and you don't tend to feel all that uncomfortable. Sometimes you'll paradoxically just start undressing, taking your clothes off once you get really cold, and that of course just is part of a downward spiral there's no way out of.
My way out of this is to get dressed and get out of this wind.
Yeah, you're starting to shiver. Yeah. I think it's time we maybe stop this and got you warmed up now, eh?
Bad idea.
Yeah, okay.
The rescue team always carries these portable tents so that hypothermic patients can be treated on scene out of this unbelievably cold wind.
Straight out of the wind.
Let's just get a reading from that thermometer now.
Okay.
And then we can get rid of that.
It's actually dropped, but it's 35.1.
Okay.
I'm now on the verge of hypothermia. If I was on my own, I could be in real trouble. And I can't stop shivering.
You started shivering now as that cold blood has started to come back into the core. Okay, and that shivering will help to generate some energy that will start getting your temperature up again.
I mean, you wouldn't last long, would you?
No. Come in here, get out the window.
To warm me up further, Peter escorts me to a freshly dug snow hole, which may be cramped, but is surprisingly comfortable.
Oh, amazing what a difference it makes out of the wind.
Yeah, I mean it's -7 at the minute, so we've got a wind chill of about -27. So you just walked out of that. So just by coming in here, you've risen 20 degrees, just like that.
And that's actually what it feels like.
Yeah.
Snow is a very good insulator because it traps air between the latticework structure of its crystals. This air is trapped so tightly it can barely move, greatly reducing the transfer of heat. These snow holes can quite literally become lifesavers.
It's quite astonishing how low people can go and actually survive, you know, and every year from around the world there are tales of people who have been warmed up from being apparently dead.
Really?
Yeah, and you know the old adage, nobody's dead until warm and dead is absolutely true.
One of these medical miracles is mountaineer Jamie Andrew.
Hypothermia is a funny thing, you know, it takes you by stealth. You just at first start becoming more and more detached from the situation, and it feels as if it's just happening to somebody else. And then you become more and more confused, eventually delirious, and then ultimately you'll become unconscious.
He survived 5 days and nights in temperatures that reached -70 in a climbing expedition to the French Alps that went tragically wrong.
You know, it's really quite a calm and easy way to die, if one had to choose. You know, there's nothing at all dramatic or panicky about it. It's just like drifting off to sleep. You know, it's a real silent killer that way.
Jamie suffered a double blow when he realised he'd also got frostbite.
It was amazing how fast it happened. The fingers, while I was fighting with a zip, just became frozen solid, what seemed almost instantly. And suddenly you have these hands that don't move. They're just frozen solid like pieces of meat out of your freezer, and you can't do anything with them. And I just remember thinking, oh well, this is it. I'm just going to close my eyes now and let myself drift off to sleep, and I'm never going to wake up again.
When Jamie Andrew was found, his companion, Jamie Fisher, had succumbed to the hypothermia only hours before. Somehow Jamie had clung on to life, but the frostbite had caused irreparable damage.
The doctors and the surgeons were forced to, in order to save my life, to amputate both my hands and both my feet.
Despite his ordeal, Jamie has conquered his disability and returns to the mountains whenever he can.
Some activities like skiing and snowboarding, I'm actually, I like to think, better now than I was before the accident. So, you know, my life goes on. My life is, you know, couldn't be any better.
Emerging from the relative safety of the snow hole is like walking back into a freezer. We're still at the top of the mountain, and the team needs to get me down safely. Normally I'd be airlifted off, but last night my helicopter also fell victim to the ferocious weather here.
The helicopter was approaching Corriantrecht to pick up a climber who'd broken an ankle when it was buffeted by 60-mile-an-hour winds and driving snow.
Forced into an emergency landing, this footage shows how the Arctic conditions froze the helicopter solid. 2 inches of ice had formed on the rotor blades, causing the helicopter crew to abandon their machine. Along with the injured climber, they were led to safety by the guys of the Cairngorm mountain rescue team. Taking a total of 8 hours to trek through a freezing blizzard, this lot have not yet been to bed.
It's hard going carrying a stretcher over a boulder field. The stones are covered in snow and ice. It was dark, of course, usually is. And as I say, 8 hours, yeah, the chaps are all pretty tired.
So with no helicopter available, the team wrapped me up for a similar emergency evacuation.
Very impressive.
Right, Nick, that hat of yours is pretty much wet through, so I'm just going to replace it with a dry one.
Thank you.
Because you'll be losing a lot of heat there. We're just going to put this down over your head.
Now, just like the injured climber, I'll have to endure a stretcher ride across this Arctic wasteland. I feel safe, but it's not exactly fun.
Cairngorm control, Cairngorm control.
Can we hurry up? It's not very nice here.
For me, this has been a vivid and graphic experience. Whilst the team would never have let me freeze to death, they had allowed me to experience the very real effects of extreme cold on the human body.
I did sort of get the feeling that I was slowing down as well, like mentally. And you have to do the right things, like walking in the correct direction. And if you can't think properly, it just wouldn't last very long, would you?
These guys perform a vital service, and in winter it's not uncommon for them to be called out 4 or 5 times each week. In the 42 years that the Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team has been going, countless people have owed their lives to their skill and bravery.
I'm pleased to say that I think only once in the time, 20-odd years I've been in the rescue team, have we come across someone alive that's died on us. Normally, as you can see with the skills we have with hypothermic casualties, we can get them off pretty safely.
While the intense cold can be a killer, there's an even greater threat lying in wait unseen on these slopes. The avalanche is an unstoppable force of nature that strikes fear into the heart of everyone in the mountains. This huge wall of snow will carry away anything or anyone in its path.
I just felt the speed increase, and it's sort of like a sonic whoomp, you know, as it just goes.
Surviving one of these is purely a matter of chance.
I was whipping down on a plaque of snow.
I'm continuing my journey to investigate the very real threat that snow poses to us in Britain. Having experienced extreme cold, I'm now in search of an even greater hazard here in the Cairngorm Mountains of Scotland. These beautiful peaks harbour one of the most powerful and destructive forces that nature can muster, the avalanche. But as I set off to find out more about these stunning but lethal phenomena, all over the UK, people are waking up to another morning of chaos.
After such a heavy snowfall overnight, some resorted to unusual means of getting around this morning. Winter weather saw a band of snow fall over much of the country.
Blizzards left hundreds of clubbers in Glasgow with no option but to queue to get back into the nightclub they'd just left. Stranded, they had to sleep on the dance floor. Strathclyde police say it was fortunate only 3,000.
But snow is two-faced. This is one corner of the country that welcomes its arrival. Skiers have been coming to resorts like Aviemore in the Cairngorm Mountains since the early 1950s.
One of the few snags about skiing is that it seems to take so long to get up the mountains and no time at all, it seems, to come down, whereupon you have to start all over again. For those who don't mind the exertion, there are any number of ways of tackling the problem.
Skis, whoever invented skis, what ridiculous things. It's sort of like learning how to walk again, isn't it, with very strange feet.
As a non-skier, this is my first experience of winter sports.
Jolly boring, I have to say, this business, going up like a crab for a very short piece of excitement.
But it's the search for this excitement that tempts people off the safe, controlled pistes. Often unaware that deep in the virgin snow lies the threat of an avalanche.
Snow will pile up, and in the same way as floods can cause substantial damage, so can snow. A cubic metre of snow approaches something close to a tonne, and eventually, in the right conditions, the snow will break away and you'll end up with this wall of snow, like a tsunami. That snow carries with it all kinds of material. It carries rocks, it carries trees, it carries people.
On March 20th, 1986, this group of survival experts found themselves in the middle of a drama that would see two of their number caught in separate avalanches. As one of the worst storms ever to batter the UK struck the Cairngorm Plateau, Sam Crymble and Mark Diggins were left fighting for their lives.
It's remarkable the difference between when you're standing here and how calm it is, and actually when you go up there and how violent it can
windy.
be. Absolutely, yeah, really, really windy.
You have to remember that the picture postcard you see 1 minute and it looks very pleasant, and an hour's time could be a fight for survival.
As a huge area of low pressure descended upon the Cairngorms, temperatures plummeted and wind speeds increased.
Pressures were falling very, very rapidly at the time. On top of that, we had also what they call an inversion, and that's basically a sort of warmer bit of air above the tops of the mountains, which compressed the wind strength. And that energy, that vast momentum going across the top of the Cairngorms, put wind speeds of over 150 miles per hour.
In fact, the highest recorded gust exceeded 170 miles per hour.
It was like someone turning a dial, and the wind just seemed to accelerate. Then we heard this noise like express trains, and it just hit us bang, and we were just blown across the ground.
Both men are highly experienced mountaineers and survival experts. Each was leading a group of students on a 2-day course in mountain navigation. But this had now become a fight for survival.
We were pretty well on our hands and knees most of the time. Visibility down to, it was feet rather than meters. And in high winds, it's very, very difficult to breathe. You know, the wind seems to drag the breath out of your lungs.
I remember lying on the ground, and the only way I could hang on to the ground was by driving my ice axe into the ground. I was using muscle strength to hang on to my ice axe, and I was just being stretched away from it, and I was just hanging on for dear life, sort of thing.
With the temperature well below freezing and visibility of just a few feet, both men tried desperately to find their way off the mountain.
You've got your compass icing up, you've got the snow and ice blowing in your face and eyes, then it just makes navigation really, really difficult.
Trying to lead his students to safety, Sam Crymble took a calculated risk. He attempted to cross an area he knew was prone to avalanche.
Working in that weather, I suppose the odds are stacked against you. And I knew it was an avalanche risk slope, but I didn't have a choice. And it just shattered around me.
Sam was now taken down the mountain along with hundreds of tons of snow.
I was carried away and rolled over and over a few times, felt my leg going. I knew below that there were crags, so I thought I was heading for the crags. So I thought the fact that I had a broken leg wasn't going to be neither here nor there.
Lost and disorientated, Mark also strayed too close to a cornice edge.
A particularly vicious squall came, and I was just airborne. You couldn't see. There was snow in your eyes and in your face and blowing around. You had no sensation of the ground. And I realised that I was actually in the air, dropping. And I thought, this is it.
Also caught in an avalanche, Mark had just seconds to save himself.
I was whipping down on a plaque of snow, so I used my fingers and my toes to just try and gradually slow myself. And eventually I did slow down, thank God, and I came to a stop, and whew, that was quite a relief, I tell you.
Remarkably, when Sam Crymble was finally rescued, his broken ankle was the only injury.
They say your whole life flashes in front of you. It's not quite true, but, you know, I had a wife and 2 children, so I wondered who would tell them, for example. I remember that.
I was quite young, I felt invincible, but that really brought it home to me that the weather can be so violent that you're lost. You could easily die.
Not everyone has been as lucky as Sam and Mark. Avalanches here in Scotland have claimed many lives.
The unforgiving mountains have swept away 4 lives in a deadly avalanche. Miraculously, 3 others survived, buried for 16 hours under tons of snow. They were 6 friends setting out with an experienced local guide on a winter skills climbing expedition.
Tragedies like Aonach Moor spurned Blythe Wright to set up the Scottish Avalanche Information Service here in Aviemore. It issues daily reports of the avalanche threat, warning anyone who ventures up the mountain which areas to avoid.
A number of us who climbed at the time were alarmed at a rising number of avalanche fatalities in the mid-80s. Some of the best young climbers in Scotland, in fact, 1 or 2 of them were killed in avalanches. So we thought we'd better do something about it.
Their predictions are based on this computer model, which analyses the risks associated with certain climatic conditions. The model compares conditions of the forecast day with past days in its database that have produced avalanches. Conditions today make the current threat very high.
We have issued in the North Cairngorms our first high Category 4 avalanche forecast covering today.
Category 4 of 5?
Of 5 on the European scale. This avalanche is on a southeasterly aspect.
Yeah.
It's at an altitude of 1150 metres, and this actually is where our avalanche observers have gone today to have a look and see if indeed the conditions are like that, and I'm sure that they'll find that they are.
Wind speed.
Cathy Grindrod is one of Blythe's team collecting the data needed for the computer model.
In Scotland, avalanche conditions can change within half a day. So, like, one of us goes out every single day between mid-December and mid-April. Whether it rain, hail, shine, 100-mile-an-hour winds, we have to go out. Right, my next temperature is -7.3. That's about the coldest temperature I've had this winter so far in the snowpack.
Kathy is checking the different layers of snow within the pack. Some will be as hard as concrete, having been compacted by the wind. Others will have the consistency of dry, powdery sugar. These are the weak layers, and they are the cause of avalanches. Weaknesses are formed in a number of ways. This one is made up of these tiny rounded snow crystals called graupel.
A graupel is a round-up snowflake. They're a bit like hailstones, so as it's carried on the wind and the moisture in the air makes it into a little round ball. But they can cause a weakness in the snowpack, because they're like ball bearings, so it's the layer above it can slide off very easily.
There can be many of these weak layers in a snowpack. Over time, more hard compacted snow builds up on top, burying the dangerous weak snow, making it impossible to see from the surface. Eventually, one of the layers gives way, either through sheer weight of snow or triggered by an unsuspecting skier. The huge mass of snow on top literally slides off. This is an avalanche.
I'm only putting very light pressure.
When the snow is this unstable, the risks are very high.
So I identified another weak layer. So there you go, and look how cleanly that actually came away. So today we're going to keep it at a category 4, which means it's a high avalanche risk. And if you're on anything quite steep, large snow slopes, you could quite easily trigger an avalanche.
In Scotland, most victims trigger their own avalanche.
For climbers and skiers, it's the small ones that do the damage. It might be only big enough to carry a person down, so it might be a metre and a half wide, and it might slide for 50 metres.
The avalanche may seem small, but the victim is still carried down the mountain accompanied by hundreds of tons of snow. This can set as hard as concrete within 3 seconds of coming to a halt. Anyone buried must be found and dug out fast. As once trapped under the snow, it's the build-up of the victim's own carbon dioxide that kills. The chances of survival plummet from 92% to 30% if the victim is not rescued within the first 15 minutes. I volunteered for just a small taste of how this might feel.
I got a lot of snow in my face, which is deeply unpleasant. Stinging actually, really nasty.
And I was amazed at how little snow it took to paralyse me completely.
How much snow is there on top of me? On my legs, say? A foot? 6 inches? I can't move my leg. Really heavy.
If my head was under the snow, I'd have no chance of freeing myself and could die of asphyxiation within a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
Avalanches are lethal and indiscriminate. Despite the efforts of Blythe and his team, many still get caught every year. Surprisingly, it's the highly experienced and avalanche aware who often get caught out.
There's a very good phrase from a very respected avalanche scientist who said, remember my friend, the avalanche does not know that you're an expert.
Yeah.
And that's perhaps the crux of it, you know. You shouldn't be lulled by the fact that, yeah, I've been there a lot of times before. Usually it's okay, but then one day it might not be okay.
But you don't have to be up a mountain for snow to make life unbearable. In fact, most of us only come into contact with it on our roads. It's here that Britain really suffers, as time after time, just a few inches is enough to cause chaos for millions.
London stopped and people were walking, and that was an inch or so of snow. I mean, imagine a real disaster.
Every winter in the UK, snow and ice contribute to the deaths or injury of over 2,000 people on our roads. Millions more get caught up in the chaos and confusion. It's an all too familiar scene.
This was the M2 motorway, swept by blizzard conditions as police and recovery teams worked to reopen it. One accident followed by another and another.
Most of the blame is placed at the door of motorists who just don't know how to drive in these conditions. So I travelled to a country that has tackled this problem head-on by teaching its drivers how to deal with snow and ice. This is Elm in Switzerland, one of 6 national centres that since 1998 has been offering a 2-day course in snow driving skills. My instructor, Daniel, is going to put me through my paces. But how on earth can I drive on this stuff if I can hardly stand up?
You can see already how slippery it is. It's pure ice below. So we really have to take care and reduce the speed. We'll feel some load changes on the car. We'll have some understeering most probably, maybe some oversteering. And here's then quite important that you act immediately.
Less gas.
With stopping distances increased by 10 times and virtually no grip, this is impossible.
Right. Quicker.
Right now we have about 70 to 90% less grip, less friction than we have on a dry, paved runway.
You were steering till the end, till the stop, and that doesn't help you at all.
The basic principle in these conditions is to steer the car into the skid and not to snatch to the brake if you lose control.
It's not too much grip.
This is easier said than done, as once the back end gets out of line, there's just no getting it back.
It's a few kilometres an hour speed difference makes a huge variation in your ability to control it. You lose control, just like that. And as soon as you start losing it, you have to be so quick to respond, otherwise it's gone. And you know, it feels like fun here now, but if you're on a road, it's actually very dangerous.
Teaching drivers how to deal with snowy conditions is obviously sensible. But here in Britain, huge efforts are made to keep the roads free from snow and ice in the first place. Each year, the Highways Agency spends over £150 million spreading one of the most common minerals on Earth.
This stuff may look a bit like snow, but it's not. It's actually what you might call snow's most deadly enemy. It's salt. Without it, every time it snowed, we really would be in trouble.
Although we may still call it gritting, the grit was replaced by salt over 50 years ago. It works by lowering the freezing point of water by just enough to prevent melting snow or rain turning into ice.
Salt just happens to work over the right range for de-icing roads. So it works down to about -8, -10, which is perfect for the UK.
The salt deposits here in Cheshire were formed by an ancient sea that evaporated over 220 million years ago. Today, getting at it is no mean feat. Some 500 metres down, these tunnels now extend for nearly 130 miles. This continuous mining machine excavates nearly 12 tonnes an hour, but even at that rate, there's enough salt down here to last at least another 500 years. Despite all this effort, getting salt onto the road before it snows doesn't always go to plan. On January the 30th, 2003, a blizzard swept in across southern England and paralysed the country. Tens of thousands were stranded as airports closed, trains stopped, and the M11 and M25 ground to a halt.
Good afternoon, welcome to Drive with Jane Garvey and Pete Allen. Our main story in the programme today: snow has brought huge parts of the country to a standstill. For thousands of you, it's a really terrible journey home. So what's the advice? Just don't go out if you can avoid it.
Well, certainly if you don't have to make your journey, you'd be well advised not to, I think, this evening.
Radio 5 Live presenter Peter Allen had just finished his drive time show when, ignoring his own advice, he set off for home.
If we said it once, we said it 100 times. We said, look, just stay at home, don't go out unless you have to, just be careful. And I listened to my own words, and then I ignored my own words. You know, you sit in the studio and you issue all the warnings and you talk about white hell, but actually the truth is you don't really believe it. You actually believe that, in fact, when you get out there, it'll be fine.
But it wasn't fine, as Peter, like so many others, had to spend the night in his car in sub-zero conditions.
I had no water. I had no shovel. I just had this kind of inner conviction that it would be all right.
Peter passed the time by appearing live on the radio and television.
The whole of London, the north of London, as I was trying to drive through, was just like an ice rink. I mean, it was just impossible. There were, you know, people slip-sliding around, cars, buses. You couldn't get through.
The chaos was blamed on the Highways Agency, who had failed to grit the roads despite the blizzard being well predicted.
They'd been told about it 2 or 3 days in advance. But what we had was, on the M11, lorries jackknifed. As soon as that happens, you block the roads. You block the roads, the gritters can't get on. If the gritters can't get on, the road congestion just gets worse and worse and worse.
It did make you realise how fragile our system is, really, our transport system. It takes hardly anything, and it just stops. And that was a very minor matter, but London stopped, and people were walking, and that was an inch or so of snow. I mean, imagine a real disaster. Imagine what would happen if we really all had to get out of London. And the answer is, we wouldn't really all get out of London.
It's impossible to be certain what the future holds for Britain as far as snow is concerned. Maybe we'll never again see a winter as harsh as 1963. But whenever it does fall, it seems more likely that snow will be as disruptive as it's always been.
We can only hope that the public and local authorities who are caught with their pants down will pull their socks up, if you see what we mean.
It's the same old story. A bit of snow and half the country closes down. Drivers stuck for longer than 13 hours in jams, airports closed, and people forced to sleep in the office.
So for now, every winter Britain will continue its love-hate relationship with snow. And scenes like these will inevitably be Britain's worst weather.
Inside, there's a small part of me that thinks snow, isn't it lovely? And then there's a larger part these days which thinks snow, what a pain in the arse.